Imagine a world without hunger, without cold, without predators. A world where your only job is to eat, sleep, and breed. We call this paradise. We spend our entire lives trying to build it. We invent machines, we build cities, we cure diseases, all to reach this state of perfect safety. But what if I told you that paradise is not a dream? It is a grave. We assume that suffering is the enemy of life. We assume that if we remove the struggle, we will finally be happy. In 1968, one scientist decided to test this assumption. He didn't use humans, he used mice. And he didn't build them a cage. He built them a civilization. He called that Universe 25, and it was the last one he would ever build. Dr. John B. Calhoun was not looking for a cure for cancer. He was looking for a cure for the city. He looked at the exploding human population of the 20th century and asked a simple question: what happens when we run out of space? Not out of food, but out of distance. To find the answer, he decided to play God. He designed a world where want was impossible. He eliminated every external threat. No cats, no owls, no disease. The temperature was always perfect. The food hoppers were always full. It was a utopia designed by an architect who wanted to see if a species could survive its own success. He was about to find out that the answer was no. The box was a cube, 2.7 meters wide. The walls were lined with vertical tunnels made of wire mesh, leading to nesting boxes. There were 256 apartments. Each one could house 15 mice comfortably. In total, the universe could hold 3,840 residents without overcrowding. The water system was unlimited. The food could feed thousands. It was an engineering marvel, a closed system designed to remove the concept of scarcity. Calhoun checked every detail. He ensured that no mouse would ever have to fight for a crumb of bread. He removed the survival of the fittest from the equation. He effectively turned off the engine of evolution and waited to see if the car would keep moving. Day 1, the gates opened. 4 pairs of mice were introduced into the Garden of Eden. They were the healthiest, strongest specimens chosen from the lab. Adam and Eve, multiplied by 4. They found themselves in a vast, silent, empty world. For a mouse, this was the equivalent of discovering a deserted planet made of cheese. At first, there was caution. They explored the tunnels. They marked their territories. They realized that there were no enemies here. The stress hormones in their blood dropped. They began to build nests. This was Phase A, the strive period. But there was not much to strive for. The war for survival had already been won for them. For the first 104 days, the population grew slowly. The first generation was getting used to the luxury. They were good parents. They nursed their young. The social structure was traditional. The males protected the nests, although there was nothing to protect them from. The females cared for the pups. It was a golden age. But mathematics is a relentless force. Once the first generation matured, the exploit phase began. The population didn't just grow, it exploded. Every 55 days, the population of the universe doubled. 20 mice became 40. 40 became 80. 80 became 160. The silence of the first month was replaced by the rustling of hundreds of tiny feet. By day 315, there were over 600 mice. The universe was alive. To the casual observer, it looked like a thriving metropolis. There was food for everyone. There was still plenty of space in the nesting boxes. But Calhoun noticed something disturbing. The mice were not distributing themselves evenly. In a normal environment, animals spread out. But in Universe 25, the mice began to crowd together in certain areas. They were addicted to the presence of others. They would eat together, shoulder to shoulder, even though there were empty feeders just a few feet away. The physical space was abundant, but the social space was shrinking. This was the first crack in the Utopia. Calhoun called it the behavioral sink. Even with unlimited resources, the mice created artificial scarcity. They turned eating into a social event, which turned into a competition. They didn't need to fight for food, yet they started to shove each other. Why? Because without predators, the only source of stimulation was each other. In the wild, a mouse spends 90% of its energy finding food and avoiding death. In Universe 25, that energy had nowhere to go. It began to turn inward. The young mice, who should have left to start their own families, had nowhere to go. The world was finite. They were trapped in a paradise with their parrots, their cousins, and their rivals. The social ladder began to collapse. In nature, a dominant male defends a territory to secure resources. Here, he had nothing to defend, but the instinct remained. Some males became hyper-aggressive. They would attack others for no reason. Not for food, not for mates, but for pure, undirected rage. On the other side of the spectrum, some males simply gave up. They withdrew from the competition entirely. They stopped defending their females. They stopped exploring. They became the sleepers. They would just eat and sleep, ignoring the chaos around them. The class system was breaking down into the violent and the apathetic. The females suffered the most. With the males either fighting or sleeping, the protection of the nest fell apart. Nursing mothers were constantly interrupted by intruders. They became stressed, aggressive, and then the unthinkable happened. The mothers began to attack their own babies. In a world of plenty, the maternal instinct, the strongest bond in nature, was dissolving. Mothers would kick their pups out of the nest before they were weaned. Some would abandon them in the middle of the floor. The social glue that held the species together was melting in the heat of overpopulation. By day 315, the population growth abruptly slowed down. The exponential curve flattened. Not because they ran out of food. There was still enough food for 3,000 more mice. They stopped breeding because they had lost the will to breed. The society was technically alive, but spiritually dead. This was the turning point. The moment where the first death occurred. Calhoun distinguished between the death of the body and the death of the spirit. The mice were physically healthy, fat, and sleek. But inside, the complex behaviors that make a mouse were gone. The chaos was about to turn into silence. The rejected males formed a new class, the outcasts. With no territory to defend and no females to court, they withdrew to the center of the pen. They huddled together in a shivering mass. But this was not for warmth. It was a target-rich environment. They became the victims of random violence. They were covered in scars. Paradoxically, they didn't fight back. When attacked by the dominant alpha males, the outcast would just stand there and take the bites. They had lost the instinct of self-preservation. They were a cluster of living ghosts waiting for the end. The center of the universe became a ghetto of broken spirits. As the males collapsed, the females were forced to change. With no one to defend the nests, the mothers became the warriors. The gender roles inverted completely. The females became hyper-aggressive to protect their territory. But this aggression had a terrible side effect. It didn't turn off when they entered the nest. The mothers brought the war home. They remained in attack mode even with their own pups. The nurturing instinct was replaced by pure territorial rage. The nest, once a sanctuary, became a danger zone. The pups were not learning love. They were learning fear from the very creature meant to keep them safe. Violence in Universe 25 became ritualistic. In the wild, animals fight for a reason: food, mates, or land. Here, they fought for nothing. It was violence for the sake of stimulation. Cannibalism appeared. Not out of hunger, the food hoppers were full, but out of a deranged boredom. They ate each other because there was nothing else to do. Social rules evaporated. Mice would attack a neighbor, then minutes later, try to groom them. The signals were crossed. The language of the species was turning into gibberish. It was a collective psychosis fueled by the sheer number of bodies pressing against each other in the dark. Amidst this hellscape, a new caste emerged. Calhoun called them the Beautiful Ones. They were males who withdrew completely from the society. They didn't fight. They didn't court females. They didn't try to define territory. They simply ate, drank, slept, and groomed themselves. Endless grooming. They were physically perfect, no scars, no torn ears. Their fur was sleek and shiny, but it was a hollow beauty. They were the ultimate narcissists. They looked at the chaos around them and decided to disengage. They survived by becoming invisible to the social order. They were healthy bodies with empty minds. The Beautiful Ones were not just peaceful. They were socially autistic. They had lost the capacity to interact. If a female approached them, they ignored her. If a male challenged them, they ran away. They spent their waking hours smoothing their fur, obsessed with their own physical maintenance in a dying world. They represent the final stage of the collapse. When the external world becomes too stressful, the individual retreats inward. They optimize their lives for zero pain and zero struggle. In doing so, they optimize themselves out of existence. They were the last generation, and they didn't care. The infant mortality rate hit 96%. Almost no new generation was surviving. The few pups that weren't killed or abandoned by their mothers were thrown into the crowded pit before they were ready. They grew up in the mob. They never learned the complex dance of courtship or hierarchy. These survivors were socially stunted. They didn't know how to be mice. They only knew how to be part of the swarm. They tried to mount males and females indiscriminately. They tried to nurse from adults who were not their mothers. They were a lost generation, biologically mature but emotionally infantile. By day 560, the population peaked at 2,200. It never reached the theoretical capacity of 3,840. It stopped because reproduction stopped. The universe entered the death phase. The noise of the early days was replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. The violence slowed down because no one cared enough to fight. The colony was filled with the Beautiful Ones and the lost generation. They moved like sleepwalkers. They would eat, groom, and sleep. The complex society Calhoun built had devolved into a warehouse of breathing mannequins. The experiment was technically still running, but the civilization was over. Dr. Calhoun watched this with horror. He wondered, Was this state reversible? If he took these beautiful ones, who were young and healthy, and moved them to a new, fresh universe, would they wake up? Would they start over? He selected a group of the finest specimens and removed them from the hell of Universe 25. He placed them in a fresh enclosure, plenty of space. No overcrowding, no trauma, just a clean slate. He expected them to colonize this new world. He expected nature to reboot. He watched and waited for the first spark of instinct to return. But nothing happened. The beautiful ones didn't breed. They didn't build nests. They stayed in their separate corners, grooming their perfect fur. They had forgotten how to live. The capacity for social behavior, once lost during development, could not be relearned. The hardware was there, but the software had been erased. They lived out their natural lifespans in the new paradise and died of old age, leaving no heirs. This was the most terrifying discovery of Universe 25. The behavioral sink was terminal. Once a society loses its purpose, it cannot simply be restarted. The damage to the spirit was permanent. Back in the main enclosure, the population began to crash. The old mice died. No young replaced them. It was a slow, mathematical extinction. The last mouse in Universe 25 would die months later, alone in a city built for thousands. The Utopia had achieved its final form, a great yard. But Calhoun wasn't just studying mice. He was looking at the cities of 1970. He was looking at the high-rise apartments and the crowded streets. In the next part, we will explore the terrifying parallels. Is the beautiful one a mouse, or is it us? Dr. Calhoun didn't see mice in the cage. He saw us. He published his findings in 1973, just as the Western world was moving into massive concrete high-rises. He argued that when a population exceeds the capacity of its social space, the result is not just stress. It is a fundamental rewiring of the brain. He called it the crunch. Look at our modern cities. We stack humans in boxes, just like the nesting tubes of Universe 25. We have eliminated the predators. We have climate control. We have unlimited calories available at the supermarket. We have built the exact same physical utopia, and we are seeing the exact same psychological cracks. The first symptom in the mouse utopia was pathological togetherness, the inability to be alone, yet the inability to connect. Walk through Tokyo, New York, or London. You are surrounded by millions of people, yet you are completely anonymous. You are physically crowded, but socially starving. In a small village, every interaction has meaning. You know your neighbor. In the megacity, interaction is just friction. To survive the sensory overload, we put up shields. We wear headphones, we stare at screens. We treat other humans as obstacles in the maze. We have become the sleepers of the experiment, moving through the crowd without touching. Then there are the beautiful ones. In Japan, they are called Hikikomori, a generation of young men who have withdrawn from society completely. They lock themselves in their bedrooms for years. They do not work. They do not date. They do not fight. They exist in a state of suspended animation, cared for by their parents. Just like the mice who groomed themselves in the corner, these humans have optimized their lives for zero stress. They have rejected the competitive nature of the economy. They have rejected the complexity of relationships. They are safe. They are fed. And they are slowly vanishing from the gene pool. The parallels continue in demographics. In Universe 25, the population crashed because the females stopped breeding and the males stopped pursuing. Today, in every developed nation, birth rates are collapsing, not because of famine, not because of war, but because of a mysterious lack of will. Economists blame the cost of living, but Calhoun would say it's biological. When the social space is full, the instinct to reproduce shuts down. We are seeing a behavioral sink on a global scale. We have created a world so comfortable and so dense that the urge to create the next generation is fading away. The mice attacked each other because they had no outlet for their energy. We have found a different outlet, the digital world. The internet is our behavioral sink. It is where we go to be hyper-aggressive without consequence. It is where we go to groom our avatars like the beautiful ones groomed their fur. We curate perfect digital lives while our physical lives atrophy. We get the dopamine hit of social interaction without the messy reality of eye contact or pheromones. We are stimulating our brains with artificial signals, just like the mice who mounted each other indiscriminately because they forgot the rules of mating. Calhoun warned of 2 deaths. The first is the death of the body. The second is the death of the spirit. He defined this as the point where an animal loses the capacity to engage in complex behaviors. Once the spirit dies, the body is just a biological machine consuming resources. Look at the lying flat movement in China. Look at the quiet quitting in the West. It is a mass refusal to participate in the rat race. It is the sound of millions of spirits quietly shutting down because the density of the competition has become too high to bear. The most terrifying finding was that the damage was permanent. The mice born into the chaos could not learn to be normal, even when moved to a better cage. Are we raising a generation that is socially disabled? Children who learn to swipe before they learn to speak. If Calhoun is right, we are not just changing our culture. We are changing our biology. We are breeding a version of humanity that is optimized for the cube, but incapable of the wild. We are becoming a zoo species, dependent on the system to survive, yet destroyed by the system we built. We built the city to escape nature. We thought we could design a better world than the one we evolved in. But we forgot that we are still animals. We still have the limbic system of a primate. When you put a primate in a box and surround it with thousands of strangers, it goes insane. The Universe 25 experiment was a warning from 1970. It told us that Utopia is a biological trap. If you remove this struggle, you don't get happiness. You get entropy. You get a slow, comfortable slide into extinction. Calhoun tried to warn us. He spent the rest of his life trying to design compassionate cities to prevent the behavioral sink. He believed that with better design, we could avoid the fate of the mice. He believed that creativity was the antidote to the crunch. But did we listen? Or did we just build bigger boxes? The population of the Earth has doubled since Calhoun's experiment. The megacities are growing, the apartments are getting smaller, the screens are getting brighter, and the loneliness is getting deeper. The mice didn't know they were in an experiment. They just followed their instincts until the end. We have one advantage over them. We can see the cage. We know the story of Universe 25. The question is it a prophecy or is it a mirror? We have the capacity to recognize the trap before it snaps shut. The experiment ended in silence, but for us, the data is screaming. The question is not how it ends, but if we have the courage to change the variables while there is still time. We must look for the door that the mice could never find. Calhoun spent his later years trying to solve the problem he discovered. He realized that space is not just physical area. It is conceptual space. The mice died because they ran out of social roles. Every role was filled. There was no need for a new leader, a new mother, or a new defender. For a human, conceptual space means ideas. It means creativity. If the physical world is full, we must expand into the mental world. We must create new roles that didn't exist before. The artist, the coder, the explorer, these are not just jobs. They are survival mechanisms. They create distance in a crowded room. The only way to avoid the behavioral sink is to increase complexity. If a society becomes static, if everyone does the same thing, eats the same food, and thinks the same thoughts, it collapses. We need friction. We need the deviants. The people who refuse to fit into the grid are actually the ones keeping the grid alive. In Universe 25, the deviants were the beautiful ones, but they deviated by quitting. Calhoun argued for a different kind of deviation, creative rebellion. To survive the density, we must build internal universes that are bigger than the external one. We must value the strange, the new, and the difficult. This is why art and philosophy are not luxuries. They are biological necessities. They are the pressure valves of the city. When we create something, we carve out a unique identity. We reclaim our social space. We stop being just another number in the census and become a distinct signal in the noise. A society that suppresses creativity is signing its own death warrant. If we force everyone to be productive and efficient in the same way, we are just recreating the mouse utopia. Efficiency is the enemy of resilience. The messiness of human culture is the only thing preventing us from turning into automatons. Calhoun proposed a new kind of urban design. He called it the compassionate city. He argued that we need to design barriers as much as we design connections. We need privacy. We need the ability to turn off the social signal. The open plan office, the constant notifications, the transparent walls, these are poisons. We need lag. We need time to process. The mice went crazy because they couldn't escape the presence of others. To save our humanity, we must redesign our environment to respect solitude. Connection is good, but constant connection is a pathology. We need the discipline of silence. Then there is the ultimate escape, physical expansion. We are looking at the stars not just for curiosity, but for survival. Mars is the new frontier. It is the release valve for the species. Just knowing that there is a somewhere else changes our psychology. It gives us a horizon. But we cannot run away from our biology. If we send humans to Mars in tight tin cans, without solving the behavioral sink, we will just recreate Universe 25 on another planet. The problem is not the planet. The problem is the brain. We pack our trauma in our luggage. The irony is that we are trying to remove all struggle from our lives. We automate our chores. We cure our pain. We deliver food to our door. We are building the exact conditions of the mouse paradise. We think we are making life better, but we are removing the strive phase. Without struggle, there is no dopamine. Without dopamine, there is no motivation. We need problems to solve. We need heavy things to lift. A life of total ease is a life of total despair. We must voluntarily choose difficulty. We must choose the stairs instead of the elevator. This is the anti-utopia, the acceptance that pain is part of the architecture of meaning. The mice didn't have a mountain to climb. We do. And we must keep climbing it, even if we have the technology to fly to the top. The climb is the point. The beautiful ones stopped climbing. They sat at the bottom and groomed themselves until they died. To escape their fate, we must embrace the ugly, messy, exhausting process of living. We must reject the comfort of the cage. The escape starts with small rebellions. Turning off the phone, walking in the woods, making something with your hands that isn't for sale, ignoring the algorithm. These are acts of biological resistance. They are signals to your primitive brain that you are still an independent agent. You are not a mouse in a tube. You are a conscious observer, but the walls of the digital city are closing in. The algorithms are designed to keep you in the behavioral sink, feeding on your outrage and your envy. You have to fight to keep your attention span alive. Calhoun believed in the potential of dawns. He believed that even after a collapse, a new dawn is possible if there are enough creative individuals left to restart the engine. Evolution is not a straight line. It is a series of collapses and rebirths. We are currently in the twilight. The shadows are long. The population is aging. The spirits are tired. But we are not mice. We have the power of myth. We have the power of story. We can rewrite the code of our society if we choose to. The Universe 25 experiment is a ghost story told by science. It haunts us because we recognize the characters. We know the aggressive alpha. We know the withdrawn sleeper. We know the narcissist. They are us, but the ending is not written yet. The ink is still wet. We have seen the darkness. Now we must decide if we will let it consume us, or if we will use it as fuel. The cage is open, but are we brave enough to walk out into the cold? Critics argue that Calhoun's data is flawed when applied to us. They say, a man is not a mouse. A mouse does not write poetry. A mouse does not invent the internet. A mouse does not worry about the future. We have a prefrontal cortex. We have the ability to plan. We have culture. This is true. We have tools that the mice lacked. We can change the temperature. We can grow food in deserts. We can alter our own DNA. But does intelligence save us from instinct? Or does it just make the trap more sophisticated? We might just be building a better, shinier cage with faster Wi-Fi. The most significant difference is the red button. If a human society becomes too oppressive, we have the option of revolution. We can burn the city down. We can overthrow the alpha. The mice were trapped by steel walls. Our walls are political. They can be broken. We have a history of breaking them. Human history is a cycle of building a Universe 25, watching it rot, and then destroying it to start over. The French Revolution, the fall of Rome, these were behavioral sinks that were purged by fire. We have a reset mechanism that the mice lacked. We prefer chaos over stagnation. Yet, the biological parallels remain uncomfortable. Our brain chemistry is 99% identical to a mouse. We run on the same dopamine, the same serotonin, the same oxytocin. When we are crowded, our cortisol spikes just like theirs. We can write a symphony about stress, but our body still feels it. We like to think we are the drivers of the car, but often we are just passengers in a vehicle driven by ancient hormones. We eat when we are not hungry. We fight when we are safe. We doom scroll when we are lonely. The intellectual mind is a tiny rider on a giant, primitive elephant. Calhoun's critics also point out that high density does not always equal chaos. Look at Tokyo. It is the most crowded city on Earth, yet it is one of the safest. Humans have social technologies, manners, laws, etiquette that allow us to tolerate high density without violence. We adapt. We create bubbles of privacy. We bow. We keep our voices down. We follow strict social codes. These are adaptations. The mice failed because they didn't have a culture to regulate their interactions. We do. But the cost of this adaptation is high. It requires extreme repression of natural instincts. This repression creates the beautiful ones. To survive in Tokyo or New York, you must suppress your aggression. You must suppress your fear. You must become polished, polite, and numb. The Hikikomori is not a failure of the system. It is a product of the system's success. It is the ultimate adaptation to density. If you cannot fight and you cannot flee, you freeze. You turn inward. You become a perfect, harmless, non-reproducing unit. The price of peace in the super city is the sterilization of the wild human spirit. We become safe, but we cease to be alive. The terrifying thought is not that we will eat each other. The terrifying thought is that we will stop caring enough to eat. The death of the spirit is subtle. It looks like boredom. It looks like apathy. It looks like a society that is entertained to death, watching screens while the world burns. We have replaced the struggle for survival with the struggle for attention. In Universe 25, the mice fought for physical space. In our digital universe, we fight for cognitive space. And just like the mice, we are becoming exhausted by the constant friction of millions of other minds. We have built a digital universe 25. Social media is an enclosure with unlimited food, content, and zero predators. And what do we see? The exact same behaviors. The hyper-aggression of the trolls, the narcissism of the influencers, the withdrawal of the lurkers. It is a mirror. It is a behavioral sink in the cloud. We are crowding our minds into a space that is too small for the number of interactions we are having. We were not designed to know the opinions of 1 billion people. We were designed for a tribe of 150. The digital crowd is driving us mad. Is there a way to break the glass? Calhoun believed in space. Not just physical space, but conceptual space. We need new frontiers. If we cannot go to Mars today, we must go to the library. We must go to the art studio. We must expand the inner world to match the pressure of the outer world. Creativity is the only true rebellion against the sink. To create is to assert that you are not just a consumer. It is to make a mark that says, I was here, and I was distinct. The mice could not create. They could only consume. That was their fatal flaw. They had no art to save them. But time is running out. The demographic winter is here. The birth rates are falling below replacement level in every advanced economy. We are voluntarily extinguishing ourselves. It is a slow suicide, a quiet exit. We are too comfortable to breed, too anxious to raise the next generation. We are choosing the beautiful death. We would rather have a perfect latte and a clean apartment than the messy, noisy, chaotic struggle of a large family. We have optimized our lives for individual comfort at the expense of the species' future. We are gentle and we are dying. Yet, nature hates a vacuum. If we fade away, something else will take our place. The experiment proves that nature does not tolerate a static equilibrium. If we stop striving, we stop existing. The universe demands motion. It demands struggle. It demands life. We are standing at the edge of the enclosure. We can see the food hoppers are full. We can see the nests are warm. But we can also smell the decay. The choice is ours. Do we stay in the paradise and die? Or do we break the walls and face the unknown? The experiment ended on day 1588. The last mouse died. The population went from 2,200 to 0. There was no famine. There was no disease. There was no predator. They died of a social cancer. They died because they achieved everything they ever wanted and found it was not enough to sustain life. It is the ultimate tragedy. The pursuit of happiness, when fully realized, led to the extinction of the species. Calhoun proved that survival is not just about calories. It is about meaning. A mouse needs a role. A mouse needs stress. Without a challenge, the biological will to live simply evaporates. We are taught that the goal of civilization is to remove suffering. We want to cure pain. We want to automate work. We want to make life easy. But Universe 25 suggests that this goal is a suicide pact. If we succeed in removing all friction from our lives, we might remove the very thing that makes us human. Suffering is the grindstone that sharpens the soul. Without it, we become dull. We become the beautiful ones, perfect, smooth, and empty. The behavioral sink is what happens when a species wins the game of evolution and has nothing left to play for. So what is the verdict? Is our collapse inevitable? Not necessarily. The difference is the horizon. The mice were trapped in a box. Their physical world was finite. Our world is only finite if we choose to make it so. We have the option to expand, to explore, to choose danger over safety. We must voluntarily reject the cage. We must inject risk back into our lives. We must value the difficult path. We must build societies that reward struggle, not just consumption. We must teach our children that comfort is a tool, not a destination. Calhoun's legacy is often seen as dark, but he saw it as hopeful. He believed that once we understand the trap, we can design around it. He called for a revolution of design, to build cities that encourage solitude, to build systems that require creativity, to force the brain to work. We are the architects of our own zoo. We can change the blueprint. We can knock down the walls. We can turn off the screens. We can look at the beautiful ones in the mirror and decide to wake up. The behavioral sink is a gravity well, but escape velocity is possible. But make no mistake, the gravity is strong. The modern world is designed to seduce us into the sink. The algorithm wants you to scroll. The market wants you to eat. The city wants you to be a passive unit of production. Resisting the drift requires a constant, active effort. It is a war for your own biology. You have to fight to keep your instincts sharp. You have to fight to keep your connections real. You have to fight to remain a complex individual in a world that wants to grind you down into a simple statistic. John B. Calhoun died in 1995. His mice are gone. But his warning is more relevant today than it was in 1970. We are living in the early stages of the death phase. We see the signs, the loneliness, the aggression, the apathy. The question is no longer, will it happen? The question is, can we stop it? He left us a map of the minefield. He showed us exactly where the explosions will happen. If we walk into the trap now, we have no excuse. We cannot plead ignorance. We have been warned by the ghosts of Universe 25. The solution is individual. You cannot save the whole city, but you can save yourself. You can refuse to be a beautiful one. You can choose to engage. You can choose to create. You can choose to be messy, flawed, and alive. Do not let the comfort sedate you. Do not let the density crush you. Find your space. Defend your mind. And remember that the opposite of depression is not happiness. The opposite of depression is vitality. Civilization is fragile. It is not a permanent state. It is a balancing act on a tightrope. Universe 25 showed us how easily we can fall. It showed us that the end of the world doesn't need a bomb. It just needs a quiet room, a full belly, and a total lack of purpose. We are the only species that can choose its own purpose. That is our superpower. That is our escape hatch. If we lose that, we are just mice waiting for the lights to go out. The universe is vast. The cage is small. The choice is yours. Will you stay in the box, or will you step into the dark forest? The trap is beautiful, but it is still a trap.